So, welcome today to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Steve Sims, creator of Badgeville's Behavior Lab. Hi, Steve.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, very well, very well. Steve, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, can you tell us a little bit about you, your background, and a bit about the work that you do?
Sure. So I believe it or not, I'm an engineer by training, but my job has completely changed over the years. I was one of the early on guys in things like real-time interactive media and games and things for Philips, and then worked on everything from PlayStation 1 and a bunch of different things as a video game guy at Electronic Arts for a long time.
Okay.
From there, I went to Virtual Worlds, to Telco, where I did some things for them. So worked at NVIDIA and 3D graphics and animation. And then actually ended up in my last job before Badgeville was running a portfolio of free-to-play video games, mostly, social kind of lightweight stuff that actually they would come from Japan and Korea and China, and we'd naturalize and bring it over and then sell it.
Okay.
And what I realized as we were doing those kind of things, running the virtual economies and this and that, was really there was a change in the psychology of how they sold games, how people interacted in the larger communities of kind of an MMO, which is, basically what most of the portfolio was.
Uh-huh.
And from that, we realized that, hey, this stuff will work actually with real people in real instances. That,
Right.
That video games were almost a great greenfield to experiment with how do you get people to do things without offering them necessarily money or this or that, things like status and reputation and access and privilege and validation of some sorts. And so when I left there, I met up with the founder of Badgeville very early on in 2010, and we said, hey, why don't you come on and, I need a guy like you, and finally start going. And from there, it's been a crazy ride ever since, doing this stuff for both internal and external use cases, everything from things like Actimel yogurt over on the continent, where you guys are, to things like for Oracle or Microsoft or Samsung and their loyalty program in the United States, that kind of stuff. So it's very, very interesting.
Fantastic. Now, as part of your work, I know that you've done a lot of work and research around sort of the motivation and psychology behind, in particular, sort of customer loyalty programs. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about that, about your work and what you found out, and also kind of what makes for a good program? Because there's a lot out there, and there's some of them are not very, very good.
Yeah, so let's start with talking about what makes a good program first, and then we can talk about motivation.
Okay.
I think fundamentally you have to do your best to understand your user. Yeah. I think so many people, when they design these programs or design any kind of ad campaign or what have you, design programs for themselves, and they don't design they feign that they're designing it for the end user. But the reality is, putting yourself in the end user's boots, so to speak, is the best way to get things done.
Right.
You need to know what they want. It's not always about financial incentives. If you understand them, you can build a deeper relationship, and you can do it actually less expensively with better results.
Okay.
And in terms of what motivates them, there's a bunch of theories. You'll hear the word self-determination theory from psychology and sociology. I mean, if you think about gamification or about behavior management, which is kind of what the sweet spot where I'm in now, which affects loyalty programs, they realize that there's a lot more than just offering people deals. And so people like to feel, when they're doing things, one of the models is called a full drive model. People like to feel smart. They like to feel like, I've solved something. They like to feel successful, like they're winning. And that can be against somebody else, like in the World Cup games that we're seeing, or it can be a challenge like I climbed Mount Everest.
Right.
They like to feel socially valued, and social value stands again with being important, like a top sales guy, like you care that you're more important than the other person, or you think you are. And tribal affiliation, which is I do something just to be part of the group. I can give you little anecdotes if you wanted to example it. But, and then last is people like structure. And structure has to do with the fact that the world's kind of a scary place, and anything I can do to control it and order it and remove uncertainty and doubt to let me know that everything's going to be okay makes me feel more peaceful. Right. And so those things in combination, depending on what the program is, be it performance management or a community or a brand affinity program, right? Those things can be kind of surfaced in a variety of ways to tap into users' interests and what they want.
Because I wrote I'm really interested in sort of loyalty programs and how they work, and I saw a piece of a stat that I wrote about, or I quoted in a piece on my Forbes column a little while ago that quotes a piece of research by a company called FastMap in late 2013, and they said in the research that they'd done, 96% of consumers, they said, would be tempted to switch loyalties to a competitor by a good price promotion. I mean, what do you think of that stat? I mean, is that valid, and does that mean that most firms or many firms are only buying loyalty, or what do you think?
I think it's a balance. I think there's a lot behind it that they don't cover in just that statement.
Okay.
As an example, is the thing you're stealing person A from to go from A to B?
Right.
Is that thing? Do they have brand affinity in the first place?
Okay.
If they don't, how much is the value of the item or brand of the purchases that go? What happens is in a store, to instill loyalty or habit or any of these kind of things, you have to have frequent exposure.
Right.
And frequent exposure and loyalty. If not, if it's a cheap item, it's one thing. If you've had frequent exposure and frequent good experience, that's something else. I'll give you an example. As I mentioned, good necessarily in the statement hasn't been qualified, brand loyalty is being ignored. So let's say you're competing with Apple. I'm a big Apple fanboy.
Okay.
All right. And so in order to get me to switch from Apple to something else, how are you going to do it? Are you just going to price drop your phone?
Yeah.
Are you going to offer me both features and things like that? You maybe offer the best product you can and then price cut. And, even if you offer them the cut, in cost, like how many percentage of Apple iPhone customers do you think you're going to get?
Right.
Are you going to get 4%, 10%, 96%? I think loyalty is more than just price. But, in getting in that kind of thing, maybe you wouldn't even get a quarter of the Apple users, dropping something for free. But I think that, bottom line, the pivots around what your question is has to do with what's the exposure and what's the attachment already emotionally, the investment to the previous brand before the conversation starts. If it's generic, I think the last thing to finish up is if it's generic tablets, let's say I don't even know anything about Apple and I'm just into Android tablet. I'm looking for a tablet. Probably the ability to pull from an Asus tablet to a pick another subcon out of Taiwan, another vendor tablet. I don't know, right? Yeah. Probably pretty easy. Probably fairly priced because they're all off of the same Android variant, right? But when you're involved in brand and other things and special features and stuff, it's hard.
And do you think that loyalty then is it? I mean, let's take the Apple example a little bit further. I mean, do you think that's to do with? Is that to do with brand? Is it to do with usability? Is it to do with something else? Is it to do with design? Is it to do with all of those things?
It's all of those things. Actually, the brand is the design and the usability.
Right.
What happens is there's a couple of great guys who write on this kind of stuff. And one guy's name is Nir Ayal, he's a Stanford business guy. He actually said something really interesting, which is basically the action of creating habit or getting somebody hooked in your product really has to do with they have a need, there's a trigger or a signal to an action, they do the action, and they're given a reward, and that gives them emotional investment in the product. Mm-hmm. And that kind of cycle tightens over time. And so, what ends up happening is the more positive experiences you have with the product, then when you have that internal craving or that internal need or that internal thing, you don't even think about it. You just press the button.
Right.
Because fundamentally, we didn't talk about this much, but what happens is people function on a conscious level and they function on a subconscious or a habit level.
Sure.
And when you live in the world of habits, you go to what you know, you go to what's comfortable, you go to what delivers positive experiences.
Right.
So, it's funny, a strange story today, but kind of with brand loyalty, but kind of a habit too is, I like to meditate in the morning. I thought a little crazy, but I like to meditate in the morning. But I also like to listen to Audible books. You guys have Audible there?
Yeah.
The books on tape or books on your phone. And what happened is I pressed all the buttons thinking I was pressing the thing for the meditation app, which is also a shameless plug for the guys at Headspace. Really cool stuff. But the Audible thing came up for me. And I actually just by habit, because I listen all the time, I just press the play button. I'm like, this doesn't sound like the meditation thing or whatever I was listening to, right?
Yeah.
It was that when I press the thing and the thing comes up, I automatically go and I listen to my audiobook because I walk out to my car or what have you. And so it's just the power of habit. I was pushed down to my subconscious. I didn't even think. I didn't even think. I had a full intention to do something else, right?
Yeah.
So listen to meditation thing. And just because my brand affinity with Audible and I listen so much, I pressed this kick to listen. So that's what you're dealing with people I would work, right?
I think going back to a point that you talked about earlier as well, about this sort of social recognition and, in a way, social positioning about and how that links to loyalty. And if you think take the Headspace stuff, or you take the Apple stuff, there's also people. It's also important, I think, to know that people choose things because of what it says about themselves and how it associates them with other people that they think are like them or people that they want to be, as it were. And I think that's a really big sort of driver in the way that we choose things and how we define loyalty.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the two great examples are obviously Apple.
Yeah.
I mean, they have fanboys who sit there in the forums and the thing, people identify. I think their fan base is much more rabid and hardcore. That's why they sit outside the store around the corner, right?
Yeah.
Things come out. Another one, though, is, you have to talk about what you want to be versus your perception.
Yeah.
Think about the success of the Toyota Prius.
Right.
Okay, Prius is a hybrid car. Everybody kind of poo-pooed it. They said it's not going to be that big a deal. What Toyota did, I can't remember the research paper or the article. I think it was an Ariely mentioned, but what was so interesting was that the Prius was designed on purpose to look completely different.
Right.
It looks so different. The only thing you can think of is that guy's a Prius driver, that guy's getting great mileage. And what happened is people who wanted to either identify themselves with status or being green, or what have you, and dying saving the world or the environment, what have you, would drive around these things because the outside of the car symbolized what they were.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting was, I'm an executive at a company, and I really, usually you have to drive an executive's car, right? You take around clients and that. I didn't want to spend the money between you and me. I didn't want to spend the money and buy a BMW or a Jaguar or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So by getting a Prius, I don't take people around a lot. But by getting a Prius, I can still do status and show people, that I'm, look at me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I didn't have to blow the cash that I would have had to if I had to pay the cost in the back right on.
Yeah, so it's not just about being sort of conscious and environmentally conscious. It's also about portraying yourself as being quite smart and savvy as well.
Yeah, this one, absolutely. I was making a statement, and I was making a conscious. In this one, I was making a conscious decision.
Yeah.
I mean, for us in the U.S., the Prius is half the price of Prius is half the price of the other car, right?
There's a great example. There's a great example in a film. Do you remember the film called Get Shorty with John Travolta and Danny DeVito and Rene Russo?
Yeah, I remember the film, but I don't remember what you were saying.
So John Travolta is this Shylock that gets into movies, but then gets given this car, or they prang their car and get given a replacement car, and the car's like a minivan. And they were like, minivans, but by the end of the film, everybody's driving a minivan because everybody wants to be like John Travolta's Shylock, sort of like movie producer. And it's just fascinating the way that works. Is that sort of affinity building? Okay. So taking all of this sort of stuff, Steve, and your understanding about the motivation and psychology behind loyalty programs and all the stuff that you've done with games and why people use things. I mean, what do you think the big lessons are for businesses in terms of how they can build more loyalty or understand their customers better?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's both the tactical and the strategic.
Yeah.
In the tactical, the ability to baseline, to string your campaigns together, I believe more in longer term sustained engagement than I do in episodics.
Right.
Over the long term. And what happens is it's interesting because we do a fair amount of work, or we've done a fair amount of work with agencies and things like that. And, they think, oh, I'm going to run this campaign for this product. Then I'm going to run this campaign. And the thing is, it's still the same people, that you're running campaigns. The demos may be different, but, you're going to have some overlap. So stringing those together, understanding from the tactical, understanding baseline, again, user journeys, I think they do this already, standard practice, but, understanding from the user what you're doing, understanding the context that were involved, how do they interact with the campaign, with the product, with the program, is key. We power in America, we power Samsung's loyalty program.
Yeah.
Right? So I've been talking about Apple, but Samsung makes great stuff too.
Yes.
And we power their loyalty program in America, and at least on the website. And the interesting thing is that how do you interact with their stuff? I mean, when we first launched the program, it was, everybody goes to the website and interacts, right, with the experience. Mm-hmm. But now what's happening is people are all mobile, right? The mobile shift is really, really happening and taking flight. So, their designs, their approaches, their, how the people interact has to be delivered through a mobile device.
Right.
Right? And especially the things like purchase validation. I'm going into a store to see if I want to buy that television. So I'm, quickly Googling it or going to their site and looking at things, right, mm-hmm. to see, speeds and feeds and things like that. So I think understanding, back to the main thing you asked, which is you have to understand the people, you have to understand their motivation, why they're doing things. Mm-hmm. You have to understand the context mm-hmm. that you're in. You have to understand the frequencies of engagement, mm-hmm. Typically in loyalty. So, you design a different program for an eating card program or something where people come in once a month versus you would with, like I said, that electronics experience where you're in, maybe come in a short burst to buy whatever you want and then you disappear for a while.
Right. So
different kinds of experiences, right?
Okay. I mean, so the thing is, you talked about you talked about their kind of context and stuff, and I think, is that not kind of one of the because I'm really interested in some of this stuff too, and I talk to people about some of the neuroscientific research that's coming out, or the research that's been done in the last sort of 10 years and things, and it seems that context and empathy and trying to understand somebody else's position is one of the biggest challenges that people kind of have, and because I guess the way the brain works, it's hard. It finds it very hard to do two things or to try and put itself in two places at once. Yeah.
So I mean, there's a bunch of ways you can go with that question. Fundamentally, one of the kind of big word seminal books on this is obviously the Kahneman book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Right.
There's a bunch of this, but the way your brain works for the most part, from a high level, is there's a fast, intuitive brain, and then there's basically a thinking, calculating brain that makes larger decisions.
Right.
And your brain pretty much is lazy, and most of your life is a series of habits that you trained. And human beings are very good at creating new habits and training themselves, which is one of our advantages. But what happens is, if you look at that combined with, let's say, some of the work from, let's say, DJ Fogg or somebody who basically understands that there's triggers in the environment, the trigger causes an action, right? And then whether you're going to do those things, there's a sufficient level of, are you motivated to do it and are you able to do it?
Okay.
Right? This stuff all goes back. We've been doing the same stuff for years. And it all goes back even to things like habits and addiction, right? Okay. There's a cue, there's an activity, and there's a reward and a craving. And then you've got trigger activity. Eventually, the trigger and the reward are linked, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you get the anticipatory cravings and things like that. But the point is that for any of these things, in order to design an effective system where you're getting somebody, where people are doing what they want to do, but they're more receptive to it, there has to be a trigger, there has to be the action, you have to be in the right context.
Okay.
And if those things don't all kind of occur at the same time, then the activity won't occur. I'll give you a quick example. It's not to do with loyalty.
Yeah.
We're talking on the thing. Let's say you've got your phone we're doing this via web, or not via web, but via the internet. But let's say your wife calls you on the telephone, mm-hmm. right? Do you pick up the call or not? Well, the trigger is the phone ringing, You look at the thing, and your ability to answer is very easy. You just pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And you look at the number, and the number is your wife. And so you do a quick calculation in your head. You say, well, gee, I'm talking to Steve, and Steve is all the way in California, and that would be pretty rude. I may not get the rest of the interview or what have you that I need to do, so I'm going to ignore the call.
Yeah.
So your motivation wasn't high enough. Your ability was there, and the trigger was there. If your wife is pregnant in 9 months and 8.5 or almost 9 months and about to deliver, you think to yourself, Steve won't care, right? I'm really excited about the baby.
And I don't care enough about this podcast interview to kind of like over and above the birth of a new child.
Yeah, exactly. So you pick up the phone.
Right.
And then the third variant of that is, let's say your phone was in the other part of your office or your house, and you couldn't hear it ringing. Yeah. You never even got the trigger. Right. So it doesn't matter how motivated you were, how easy it was to answer the phone, you couldn't even hear it. So the point is, that's all about context, right?
Yeah.
There's also emotional context of the experience, right? What are you doing in the thing? Like, whether you consider, whether you're even open to a pitch at that time, right? Or to an experience, right? How you're perceiving things. Mindsets change all the time.
Yes.
And, there's a really interesting, I think we were going to talk later about, research in this area. There's some really interesting stuff coming out of Columbia, the professors there. They do mostly advertising and things like that, but in terms of mindset and promotion, what they would call promotional and preventative.
Right.
They also, in the straight terms of positivity and negativity bias.
Yeah.
But the point is, people are always either going towards things that are rewarding to them or they're going away from things that are threatening to them. And so depending on what state a person is in, a win or something to engage them would be like, if you're in a positive state of mind, like a sales guy, winning is moving forward, and losing is not moving forward.
Yes.
Let's say trying to close a deal, right? If you're in a preventative mindset, winning is holding the fort. Like, let's say you run the finances for your family. Yeah. And if you hold or gain money, you're winning. And if you're losing money because your wife is spending on this new baby that's coming, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Then you think you're losing, and it makes you feel yucky, right? Makes you feel bad. So understanding what the frame of mind is in the person creates, when you pitch advertising or loyalty, creates something called motivational fit or congruency. Right. I think congruency is right. I may be using wrong, which I apologize. But and that's when they try to do advertisements, they find that sometimes multi-layered strategies with the right mindset work. Because you may, if you're in a preventative mindset, the ad for the minivan appeals to your needs for safety and this and that, where we're talking about how great the minivan was and that it's the only world's racing minivan. You may, in a preventative mindset, you think that's really stupid. And when I say it won't appeal to you, and the motivational fit there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is that linked to the some of the other sort of research that shows how the brain, in terms of the reward, the payoffs related to motivations and what we value, and the reward pathways, as it were, such that we are predisposed to minimize risk and uncertainty, and that's linked to our survival instinct. And therefore, the payoff to, again, sort of like minimizing kind of risk is actually much higher than it is to actually achieving kind of a reward of sorts.
Yeah, there's kind of a bunch of things in there that you're mentioning. Again, what happens is, in terms of positivity and negativity, positivity offset negativity bias. My understanding, again, I'm not an academic, but my understanding is that if you think about it, you and I are walking on the Serengeti hunting water buffalo, right? Yeah. And back in the old days. And
yes, indeed.
As an example, I don't know what happened to my laptop just there, but so we're walking on the Serengeti, and you see a twig in the ground, and oh my God, that could be a snake. Yeah. So you dump a bunch of adrenaline into your body, you get crazy, and you run the other direction or what have you, right? Mm-hmm. Actually, you hear about fight or flight. It's actually freeze, flight, fight is the order of response. That's why you see squirrels in the road, as an example, completely silent like a statue, thinking that they're hiding from you.
Yes.
But what happens is the negativity bias kicks in later than the positivity, which is the chasing of rewards, like chasing a beautiful beautiful person you want to connect with, right? Or chasing towards these other things. But the build of a reward is generally slower than the negativity. That's one thing.
Right.
Your second question was about, but the negative one is more severe, right? If you look at the amplitude of it, it's twig, snake, I'm going to die,
Yes.
But in the other thing, in terms of reward networks, what happens is the brain. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this right, but the brain is a bunch of circuits. It's almost like a cabinet of rivals. Uh-huh. And what happens is the way you come up with ideas is you have all these previous experiences that have neural pathways that are kind of blazoned out, and the ones that have either been, as you're deciding something, the ones that get more math get to some critical tipping point, and then you decide that's a good idea versus a bad idea.
Okay.
And in terms of what you're calling, I guess, which is habitualization, over time, if you do something over and over and over, and you do an experience, the experience as a positive thing, you're invested in it, eventually you can be tied again from the perception of creating with the reward at the end. And not the reward, but the investment, the emotional investment. And in fact, social media and addiction seeking, checking Facebook or checking email, have to do with more base internal things like fear of missing out.
Right.
Does that make sense? So you asked like 4 questions, but I don't know which one it is. I hope I answered them.
That's fine. What you said prompted me to think of some stuff, and I'm just kind of trying to join the dots a little bit. And so, but it does seem to me that what you, based on what you've said, is that actually the pursuit of a reward over time, when you become familiar with that, and there's a habit built around it, the expectation is that it becomes more of a key thing in our lives. And therefore, if we don't get that reward, it becomes
more of an automatic thing.
Yeah,
it becomes more of an automatic thing. But there is something to throw in there, though. That someone will jump all over me on the first podcast. So I'll make sure. There's something called habituation.
Right.
And habituation is really the dulling of the person. Because they've seen that same thing over and over and over and over again.
Right.
It's the dulling of novelty. So what ends up happening in our space, bringing it back to loyalty, your space, is that if you run the same program over and over and over and you don't change it, what will happen is what was originally a novelty spike in a design of an engagement program, right, will quickly die. So that's actually the biggest problem in these kind of things, is that people don't understand that. So when you design for your user journeys and you design these programs and all this stuff, you really want to map the types of features and the approaches and stuff that work best with that type of person, right?
Right.
And or the type of offering that the product or the system is taking advantage of. But even bad things will get a physio response at the beginning, right? Even bad programs will get some lift.
Yeah.
The problem is over time, good programs will have a slower decay, and bad programs will have a very quick decay.
Right.
And if you think about it in the longer term, things that are successful usually have elements of programming and people monitoring and watching them.
Right.
And think about it like the best way is I know this isn't a loyalty thing. Think about you live in the UK, right? So think about like Showtime, or think about Sky TV or something. Think about it with some premium channel that you subscribe to.
Uh-huh.
If the premium channel has a show that you like I'm really into Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I love Thrones. When Game of Thrones is over, if HBO, who's the channel that Game of Thrones is on here in the U.S., if they don't have something else, I'm going to switch my allegiance from Game of Thrones to something else.
Right.
And that's what, by the way, that's really interesting. We talked about your pricing, right? I don't necessarily have an affinity. It's kind of interesting. I don't really have an affinity to HBO. I think they're all the same, right? But my affinity is actually at the content level. That's the weird thing with media, at least for me. I don't know about you, but it's at the content level. So right now I've jumped from Game of Thrones to House of Lies or something on Showtime.
Right.
But when Game of Thrones comes back, I'll probably switch back to put my thing back because my loyalty is show.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's my loyalty, and that one is not actually to the pipe provider, to as a content curator, it's actually a thing. On the other hand, I have a huge affinity for Netflix.
Right.
And the reason for my affinity to Netflix is not because of any individual content I see, it's because of the accumulation of content.
Right.
The rating system of what I may like is so accurate for me. I don't know about for other people, but for me, it's so accurate. And how they analyze what I like, and that I find all of these shows that are, I found a bunch of BBC shows, like I love Luther, right? I watch Luther all the time.
Yeah.
And Sherlock. I found all of that on Netflix.
Yeah.
Here in the U.S. because it's shown later. And I found it because it recommended always based on what you like. You like, these kind of murder mysteries where they solve this kind of thing, right? Never would have found that otherwise.
Right.
So where I ascribe value in my loyalty with Netflix on one hand, on the other hand, on the cable example, the loyalty is not to the station, the loyalty is to the, for me, is to the content itself.
So bringing this kind of back sort of full circle, it then seems to me, based on kind of what you've said, is that actually the implications for brands, businesses, to better understand loyalty, build better loyalty programs, or just build loyalty and better understand their customers, is that they actually have to really get under the skin of what they really are and what they really mean to their customers. Yeah,
I think so. And you can measure that. I mean, that's the most interesting thing with the kind of stuff we do.
Yeah.
We actually measure action. So what happens is, if you think about the history of advertising and stuff, in the beginning there was kind of demographics in television and radio.
Yeah.
Our station is 30 to 50-year-old males, or 32 to 25 to 40-year-old females, what have you. Then what happens is we've kind of gone into the whole world of social, which is amazing. And social is, I like this and I like that. The problem is what I like and say I like versus what I do are two different things.
Yes.
Both for the good and bad, right?
Yeah.
and so what happens is in these kind of experiences, if you have the ability to kind of track, without being draconian or being harmful in this thing, but if you can track what your cohorts are doing, what they're watching, how they're watching, what the patterns are, I think Netflix, again, does this. They do this a ton and do this really well. Mm-hmm. They know when you're watching a show, they know what show, they know everything on that dashboard is instrumented. They know when you pause it, when you go to the loo, when you go to have a drink, when you restart your show, how quickly you blaze through the season or a movie. They know everything.
Yeah.
And based on that, Netflix actually does it in a positive way. They take that information and give you better recommendations, and they give you a better, more seamless experience. Yeah. Right? Okay. The trends, I guess the way to wrap it up is the trends in the world right now for me are, because they asked me, you're going to ask me about research, is there's three things that are going on that are fairly obvious.
Okay.
One is the proliferation of mobile apps, single-use mobile apps, which has nothing to do with loyalty, but it's interesting. That's in the fact that if Facebook was so smart, why didn't they come up with Instagram? If Instagram is so smart, why didn't they come up with Snapchat? Yeah. Snapchat is so smart, they could have come up with Vine, right?
Yeah.
they're all variants on a theme, but they're all phenomenal, right? Mm-hmm. But, and huge businesses in themselves, right? And they're much bigger than others. The second one is, I think I made the joke earlier, making everything about me for everyone.
Yes.
We kind of live, based on the fact that people need validation and social status and social connection and all that things. I mentioned the four things. One is being socially valued. It's everything is making everything about me for everyone, right? So a lot of vanity things, and with that vanity comes a personalization, an expectation of personalization at the cost of privacy. We don't care.
Right.
So, I'll use my Facebook login and check it's convenient with TV. I know even more about me. I mean, I'm always impressed at the, I'm on some website that I've never been to, and they're sending me and they're delivering me tailored information. Yes. And I'm like, how? And like I saw, I was on some site the other day, even though I don't remember Bateman Forbes, and there was an article ad in the side column with books that I had looked at.
Right.
How did they do that? I mean, that's creepy, right? But that's what you're dealing with. And then the last is the last trend. So first is the single-use mobile apps. The second is those kind of personalization and those kind of trends, personalization. And the third really is always on, always connected, right?
Okay.
So I want whatever I want now in something in the manner that's appealing to me, right?
Okay.
So what happens is these experiences, you talk about brands, it's understanding the user, understanding the context, how do they interact with your product, and where do they interact with your product,
Right.
and how often do they interact with your product.
Okay.
And you put those things together, and you realize, hey, if I've got a mobile program, writing, telling them to come in and check on my website, right, it's going to be hard.
Yes.
Yeah. Or if I have a 360-degree experience, maybe where I've got, physical place to go, and then some other things. I may not catch the whole experience.
Okay.
So it's an amazing world we're living in. I think things have changed more in the last 10, 20 years than they have in a long time, and I think that the technology is ahead of people in some ways.
Well, I think
we evolved that fast.
I think so. So, Steve, thank you for sort of just wrapping that up and tell us where you're thinking about going in the future. So, but my final question, and this one I always kind of end these interviews on, is this: is there anything that you'd like to shamelessly plug?
Let's see. Shamelessly plug. Like I said, I really like if you're into meditation and stuff like that, there's an amazing app on the iPhone called Headspace. Those guys deserve a prompt. Andy Parcom, I heard him on a TED Talk.
Okay.
Another one is called FitStar. If you want to do home training,
okay.
It's the best fitness app I've ever seen, and those have nothing to do with me. They're just you want to understand. Take a look at somebody who understands their user base.
Yeah.
And build brand loyalty and things that I like and use just because the design of the product is so good.
Yeah.
I think they both have conversion. So, I'm not talking about pay, and I don't make any money off these. I don't even know those guys, but both products are pretty amazing.
Fantastic. Steve, that's been really interesting. I've learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to editing all this up and getting it all written up and stuff, because it'll just seal all this all this stuff into my head. But it's been a pleasure talking to you today. That's been brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, and go Orange.
One final post note. I want to thank Steve and everybody at Badgeville for sharing their insights today. That's been brilliant. Thank you.